Good afternoon, everybody. I believe it's 3 o'clock. My name is Greg Little, superintendent here in Lexington One Schools, and welcome to our first Together Talk. And if you would like to submit a question during the course of this presentation, feel free somewhere underneath this video right here. There's a dialog box. I should have a link for you to do that. It's the same link where people submitted questions before we did our presentation today. So we are glad to have you here today. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us today, again, for our first Together Talk. Before I get started talking about the plan and answering questions, I think what I'd like to do first is tell you I realize it's been a heck of a day. It has been an eventful few hours, and what I want to tell you is that Lexington One is great because of your efforts. Lexington One, the history and tradition that this school district was built because of people like you. People who are dedicated, who are committed, and who are passionate about children, and who are willing to go above and beyond each and every day. And I just want you to know how thankful I am for your efforts. The reason people are moving into this community right now, it's because of the educational environment that you provide, regardless of what your title is. And I want to begin today by saying how much I appreciate you and how much I thank you. And you can tell I'm having some issues with my mask. I will continue to adjust it throughout the day. But I am very thankful for all that you do for our community, all you do for our kids, and what you do for each other. I believe what makes Lexington One unique is that we're a family. And I think we have approached reentry as a family. We've approached reentry as how we support each other, how we look out after each other, and more importantly, I think, or maybe most importantly, is that we're going to keep each other safe, and that's what families do. And so what I'd like to do today is talk to you about our plan and talk to you about how the plan impacts you, but more importantly, how our plan is going to impact your safety and your security and your health. That's what we prioritize. So we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the differences between our June 23rd plan and what we have presented to the state. Our June 23rd plan was a good start. It got us moving in the right direction. In the last couple of weeks, we've heard from community health organizations. We've heard from medical practitioners. We've heard from parents. We've heard from you. Really good feedback. We've also learned more about the COVID-19 virus in that time as well. And so we've taken all that feedback and we've made some tweaks to that June 23rd plan. So here are some elements of the plan that I want to make sure that you're aware of. Number one, we are moving our start date at the moment. We're moving our start date back to August 31st. Now, what that August 31st start date will do, it'll allow us to plan, train, practice our safety procedures. It'll give us time to have our hand sanitizers, our plexiglass, all the different PPE that we've ordered. It'll give us time to bring all that stuff together and have all that stuff come in. It'll really allow us to have the most up-to-date information about the coronavirus at that point and about what our wave looks like, and if we're still climbing up or if we've hit our peak and we begin to come down the other side. And it will really allow us to make any changes that we need to the plan. It'll allow us the most time to be able to do that. So we are going to recommend an August 31st start date. And we made some tweaks throughout the course of the calendar, and I believe that makes our end date somewhere around June the 9th. That's about the best we could do in terms of when we could end it by moving the start date back a couple of weeks. Now our goal, and I think our goal the entire time, is to maximize our face-to-face with students. I think that's really been a goal for us from day one. It's because we do know the importance of students being in the classroom, and we do know the importance of them being in front of you and the impact that you make in their lives. But we also know three things that in order to make that happen, in order to maximize face-to-face, we know there are three things that we're going to lean on. One is we've got to lean on masks. And so children in the classroom and outside the classroom will be wearing masks, and it's going to be students grades 2 through 12 will be required. We are hoping we're going to encourage our K-1 students to wear masks. We realize with their maturity level, and just, they're always touching it. And again, I've touched my face a million times trying to give you this presentation today. And in fact, I think what I'm going to do is go and take it off because I can't continue to do that. I am more than 6 feet away from the other participants in here today. But we know that masks are going to be important, and we know that our students need to wear them, and we need to make sure that we have 100% compliance on that. That masks are the number one mitigator when it comes to the coronavirus, and so our plan's going to lean heavily on masks. The second thing that our plan's going to lean heavily on is that we want to maximize our social distances. We know that's going to be hugely important as well, especially early on as we're getting used to all these different safety protocols. Now, the third thing that we know is the triangle, the third leg of the triangle is really hand sanitization. We're going to have hand sanitizer basically by the barrel load. You're going to have more hand sanitizer or access to hand sanitizer next year than you're going to possibly believe. You're not going to be bathing in hand sanitizer, but you're going to have a lot of access to hand sanitization. Each classroom will have lots of hand sanitizer available, and we will also be working, and we'll send you out the specifics of this idea, but we're going to take hand washing breaks during the day, and we'll talk about what that looks like K through 12 as we get closer to school. But we got to lean heavily on washing our hands. So wearing masks, washing our hands, and making sure we're maximizing our social distances. That's really where our plan has leaned on as we have made tweaks to that June 23rd idea. So before we talk about the family model, which is part of the June 23rd, before we can talk about going 5 days a week, and we've gotten a lot of feedback about that. Some people really want that. Some people are very nervous about it. We believe there has to be a transition period. And so what we are proposing is a 1-month transition period of a hybrid approach for K through 12. And what that's going to look like is it's going to be an AABB virtual day week. So what that means is one cohort is going to come to school Monday and Tuesday. The next cohort will then come to school on Wednesday and Thursday, and it will be a virtual day for everybody on Friday. And that is going to be that's what the first month of school is going to look like. Now, we switched that. Earlier, we had talked about an A-B approach where we're alternating A and B days. Well, our K-2 principals really advocated on the AABB experience because those younger students needed more consistency and continuity for the week. And so that's why we switched it from an A-B approach to an AABB approach. We think that transition period is absolutely critical to our success. You think about, we don't just jump into the deep end of the pool. You practice and you practice and you practice and you learn how to swim and you learn different strokes and you learn how to tread water. Then you jump into the deep end of the pool. You don't just jump on the bike on day one and ride it down the tallest hill in your neighborhood. You fall a lot. You use training wheels. You have lots of practice. If it was like in my house, there were lots of tears, and very often it wasn't my child. It was my wife and I was trying to teach her how to ride a bike. But you have all of these different factors. You don't just jump in and just start doing that. You have to practice, and you got to walk it through slowly. You've got to take cautious steps, and you have to make sure, especially with the uncertainty around the coronavirus, we want to take our time to make sure that we are putting you and our students in the safest environment possible. And that's why we believe in this 1 month of transition in an AABB approach. And then somewhere along late September, if it's possible, we would like to begin to come back. If we can see that it's going to be safe for you, that we would then look at more of a 5-day-a-week approach. So that is really one of the big changes. But again, it allows us to practice our safety protocols. It allows us to make sure we understand everything we need to make sure about the coronavirus. Now, I'm going to go ahead and anticipate some questions. The big question that this causes is it causes a child care concern for you before school, during school, and after school. So if you are a middle school or high school teacher, or if you work at a middle school or high school, and you have a child who attends elementary school, you are going to have an after-school care need. If you are if you work at an elementary school but have a middle or a high school age child, you will have a child care need before school. And if we're working on A and B days, especially through that first month, you're going to have a child care need anytime that you are in the building teaching while your child would be left unsupervised at home. We are finalizing a plan right now where we will provide child care for your child at the school they attend. So if you work at Meadow Glen Elementary, but your child attends Lake Murray, the child care would be provided at Lake Murray. That is the plan at the moment. So again, we may be tweaking some of the child care plans, but I want you to know that for us, child care is a non-negotiable. You cannot concentrate on your work unless you're able to make sure unless you know that your children are safe and sound, and we're going to be able to provide that to you. We are also working with the community about child care issues for the community at large, but we have a working group that is trying to initiate that as well. So there's a lot going on around child care, but I want you to know that we believe your child care needs are absolutely one of the most important decisions that we do here, and that we have made that a non-negotiable for how we move forward. So that is a lot of that's the plan. Those are the tweaks to the plan. Again, just to review, August 31st with a start date, and that we will initiate a transition period of 4 weeks where we will go K through 12, AA, BB, with Friday being virtual days. And then at the end of September, we will begin to make a decision if it's safe to continue with the 5-day-a-week model that we know we're hoping for and we're striving for, but we can't just jump into that model. We have to take our time, we have to ease into it, and we have to make sure it's safe to do so before we jump into that 5-day model on day one. So I believe we have some questions perhaps from the audience. There's not really an audience here, but you've been submitting questions already, but I think you submitted some questions as well leading up to this, and we want to make sure we answer those as well. So I'd like to turn it over to Mary Beth Hill.
So some of the questions that we've gotten so far, and these questions represent many versions of the same question. So we have created one question for you. So according to the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control, Lexington County is currently in the high incidence for COVID infection. Will these incident rates be used to make final decisions about returning to school face-to-face or going 100% virtual?
Well, those data are very important to us because it does talk about our community, and we will certainly consider that data as we're looking at about what our safety protocols and measures are, but we're also going to be looking at other data as well. The number of our students and staff who are COVID positive, the number of our students and staff who are having to be quarantined, and the number of our students and staff who have to be excluded because they have 2 or more symptoms. And so we're going to use all of that data as we're talking about is it safe for us to be in the building without social distancing, because if everybody's back 5 days a week, the chances of social distancing are not great. And so we want to utilize that data in order to make sure it's safe for our students and staff to come to school.
Right. So if an employee is required to quarantine because of exposure to a student or another staff member who's tested positive, we have questions about the leave. Will that employee be allowed to work from home during the quarantine? If not, do they use their personal leave? And what happens when their personal leave or COVID leave is used?
Oh, that's a great question. Thank you for whoever submitted that. So one thing, let me start kind of before that question. Quarantining is going to be a big deal as we have more and more people in the building, because close contact is considered greater than 15 minutes and within 6 feet. And as the social distance, as we begin to chip away at the social distance, the chances are greater for more and more close contact quarantines. And so we understand that, and even before today's press conference, our plan is focused on creating a safety net for our employees because there's so much uncertainty with COVID and who's going to have to quarantine and if their children are going to have to quarantine and how that looks. And so how we've approached this model, first of all, is if you're able to work from home, we're going to allow you to telework. And in that case, you'll be using no leave at all. If it looks like that your close contact quarantine is from your job, the district is going to cover that. If neither of one of those two work, then we have a third layer of safety net for you, and that is the COVID leave. And then finally, after all of those three things have been done, then it would be a personal leave. But I think the district has done a really good job of creating a safety net for our employees, especially with all the uncertainty with COVID-19.
So PPE is a question for employees. So will PPE be required for students, personal protection, employees, and will it be supplied by the district if it is required?
So as I mentioned earlier, we are going to do PPE. We're going to require that for our students and staff. Mask, and again, I say that without putting my mask on. I understand the irony of that for a moment. But masks are the #1 mitigating factor when it comes to the spread of the coronavirus. What you can't see in here perhaps is we have 4 people against the wall, people outside, everybody's wearing a mask. And we believe that's going to be a critical factor for us no matter what. So yes, so we're going to do PPE. We will be providing PPE for both our employees as well as our students, and then we're going to encourage our students to have, bring other PPE with them. I guess it'll be an interesting dress code issue, right? We'll start glamorizing our mask and whatnot else, but we are going to provide that PPE for our students and staff because, again, safety is our #1 priority. And masks are the #1 mitigating factor when it comes to coronavirus.
Thank you. You answered the questions that they had about childcare, and that was one of the other more prominent subjects. So is there anything you'd like to add about childcare? Because one of the questions concerned what will they do with their children if they're employees during those virtual days?
Well, again, you can't do your job if your children are not cared for. You can't be the best person that we need you to be if you are worried about whether or not your children are unsupervised at home. And so we are providing that for you. I'm planting the flag on that. It's a non-negotiable for us. Your child care needs are going to be handled at the school level. If at all possible, we're handling it at the school level.
Thank you. So some of the employees are asking, how do they provide an A day face-to-face instruction and on that same day support their B cohort virtually?
Well, I've got great news for you. And that news for you is that is our professional development. That's the professional development that we have going on right now. I believe I saw an email just yesterday that came across from Dr. Natalie Osborne-Smith about opportunities to do that professional development. We are encouraging you to sign up for that professional development. In fact, as soon as our Together talk is over, I ask you to turn on your computer, look it up, sign up for it, get into it, because we want you to be able to collaborate and work with your colleagues and be ready to go. So that is the professional development that we are focusing on. That will be our driving question as we move forward and really be the solitary focus of our professional development.
Some of the questions are, if COVID continues to escalate and we're forced to go totally virtual for a while, will employees be allowed to continue to work from home?
That question it's not that I don't want to not answer that question. I certainly want to answer the question. I would tell you that there's a lot of ifs in that hypothetical. I would tell you perhaps. I would land on it depends as an answer. But again, in every opportunity, regardless of what we're going to be forced to go into, we want to go into whatever model we can go into that protects the safety and health of our employees and of the students that we teach. So I'm gonna leave that for now as a to be determined and as a perhaps that may actually happen.
So another question, Dr. Little, that we're getting a lot is who is going to teach virtually in the Online Learning Academy and who is going to teach in the face-to-face situations? You might want to talk a little bit about what's been happening here at the district.
Sure, that's another really good question. That's a very important question for us as we move forward. Our virtual academy, I believe the deadline for that closes tonight. So if you are interested in being considered on the first round of that hiring, you need to submit your, get that application submitted or let somebody know that you're interested in submitting that application just as soon as you can. And what we may be doing is once we go through the first round of applications, we may be opening it again. Remember, we have a survey that's out to our parents. And so we're finding out what the need is for virtual teachers. And so far we've seen that need continue to grow. So if you're interested in that, let somebody know that immediately, and we will put you in the right process for that.
So there were some questions about nurses. If a school nurse is in a school working in a situation, will they have to quarantine every time they come into contact with a child who later tests positive for COVID?
Now, I've got to admit to you, I did not know this ahead of time. I had to have somebody help me with this one. Our director of nursing, Amy Wood, assures me that that is not the case and that there are CDC guidelines associated with healthcare workers and what they're going to need to do, and that she will be conducting that training for our nurses as we get closer to the school year.
Will employees have to sign a waiver? There have been some questions raised about, would they have to sign a waiver before they could come back to work? What would that look like?
So it is not our intention to have our employees sign a waiver. Now, what we will be asking you to sign is a commitment that you will check for symptoms before you come to work. But we do that for our employees working now. It's as a reminder, it's a pledge and a commitment that we're going to look after the safety of each other. And so that's why we think that is important, but it's not a waiver of liability of any way, shape, or form.
Right. So they're continuing to take questions over here in our illustrious panel. And so what we're going to do is continue on with the conversation, and then we'll come back to them towards the end for more questions.
All right. If we're, I'm supposed to be doing something else. This is, see, don't ever let the superintendent get involved in the construction of the agenda. So again, I think one of the big issues I do want to talk about again is the three areas of data. One, the number of students and teachers who test positive for COVID. Two, quarantining a number of students and teachers, as well as the number of students and teachers who have be excluded because of symptoms. So one of the things that we're going to have to, again, I want to stress this, quarantining because of close contact is going to be problematic, and we're going to be working on how to address that. Again, especially as our social distancing decreases, then the quarantining becomes more of an issue. In our transition plan, quarantining should not be a huge issue because we are maximizing our social distances. And that of course, we're still wearing masks and we're washing our hands, but the social distance is really the key factor about quarantining and about what that'll look like. Now, I believe Kimberly Freeman, did you have a question for me?
I do, Dr. Little. We have some questions around that August 31st date that you mentioned. Is that the start date for students or employees, or what does that do to an employee's start date?
So that will be the start date for students, and so it will move. Remember, we also have leap days that folks may have heard about, and so we'll have with those leap days plus the normal professional development days. For our K-8 teachers, their report date will be August 17th. And then for our K-12 teachers, it'll be the following week, I believe August 24th. We'll get those dates, we'll make those dates precise, but you can really look at them that way. There'll be a week for LEAP, the 17th through the, whatever that is, the 21st, and then the next week, the 24th through the 28th, will be the week where we do all the professional development stuff. I will promise everybody this: we will not be having convocation in 105-degree heat. So I know people are very disappointed in that, but we will not be doing that this year as well. We'll have to do a virtual approach to that.
Thank you. Another question we've seen a couple of times is around student responsibility and accountability to maintaining the mask wearing and the social distancing and that sort of thing.
Well, that is, we've given that a lot of consideration. So what we are working on right now is we are going to have a pledge that families and our students sign, and that pledge will be about how to best utilize PPE and take care of each other, and a real commitment to taking care of those around you, because this is a public health issue, and everybody has a responsibility to keep everybody else safe. And so if a child or a student is not able to uphold their side of the pledge, we also have that virtual opportunity for him or her, and we'll be able to provide that to them. But if you're going to be in a face-to-face model, you have a responsibility to take care of those people around you. And so we will be, students will be filling out a pledge in order to come back face-to-face.
All right, still me? Just making sure. All right, friends. Okay, you may have mentioned this and I may have missed it, I apologize, but have we talked about teachers who maybe would like to wear scrubs, or instructional assistants who want to be able to, take care of themselves by changing clothes immediately when they get home real easily?
Well, I think, again, we're going to be really flexible on those kinds of things. If you need to wear scrubs to make that happen because you're very, very much in close contact with students, I think that would be okay. That's certainly okay with me, and we'll be talking to principals about that. But if that's what you need to do to make sure you can take off, your clothes and dry them, or wash them and dry them very quickly, certainly that's okay with me.
All right, and I think, we talked about the mask and what that looks like. How are we thinking about addressing mask fatigue and some of those things for people who do have a hard time? Not saying that there's any lived experience with that in this room today, but how are we going to do that?
And I just need to say, I feel terrible about the fact that my mask lasted about, 2 minutes. So I apologize for that. I'm going to continue to work on that. See, that's another reason August 31st gives me plenty of time to work on that.
That's right.
So what we're going to really work on mask fatigue strategies, and to just really quickly, some basic ones might be during recess. We have multiple recesses at the elementary school built-in. They may be taking, those are maybe times that are mask-free options where we're out and spread out outside if possible. Certainly during lunches and those kinds of things, we'll be taking our mask off, certainly to eat. And so we're going to be talking about that, about the best practices associated with mask fatigue. That's going to be a critical thing because it's going to become tiresome, especially for those of us who are not in the medical field, and for those of us who are not used to wearing masks. It will become tiresome to wear those masks day in and day out. And so we want to be able to support you in that and support your students in that, because what we don't want to have happen is masks become the new disciplinary issue. We want to talk about our commitment to each other and talk about why it's important to wear a mask, and that we really have a moral obligation to one another to do that.
Thank you. Probably a two-part question.
Okay.
This plan that we're talking about today, will it stay in line with those same hours that were in the June 23rd proposal? And then the second piece to that is, does that have implications for employees' work schedule in terms of the hours of the day?
Well, perhaps. So really the hourly plan, my understanding is that it is very similar to what we presented on the 23rd. Those may actually still be tweaked as we move that forward and as we really dial that in. But in the employee day, will really be no different than what it was last year. It may shift a little bit. You may be asked to come to school a little earlier, but it'll still be the same amount of time. The employee day will not change in what it was last year. It just may look a little differently based upon what we have in terms of the elementary, middle school, and high school schedules, but your day, the length of your day will not be different.
Thank you. We're seeing lots of questions coming in around elementary and the hybrid model and the implications for devices. Will
Sure.
elementary students be able to take devices home? What might that look like? I don't know if we're there yet, but.
Well, we're much closer than we were. That is something that we are currently working on. We want to have devices K through 12. In the event that we don't have devices K through 12 at the beginning of the year, we're certainly going to have devices 3 through 12, and so it really then becomes a K through 2 issue, and we'll be working with our K through 2 teachers to ensure that when students are away from you, they can still work on the work you need them to work on. So one of the big differences in virtual learning in the spring versus virtual learning now is going to be they will begin to do new learning, and the work that they're doing either via those packets or via devices, again, we're working on the devices piece, is that it'll be learning that can continue to advance their work. So that'll be a big difference in what it was in the springs K through 12, but we're going to really pay very careful attention to those K through 2 students and make sure it's developmentally appropriate and make sure those students can be successful in those experiences.
And for those students, now that we're talking about the hybrid model, will the family model still be a piece of the story, or does that change our thinking around
The family model is still a piece of the story. So even if, so we get through the first month, and let's say that we look at it and we go, listen, the masks are hugely important. We look at it that the masks are making a huge difference, and that we can move forward with everybody 5 days a week. In that beginning, the family model, it's still my intention that the family model would be utilized just to make sure the next level for the elementary school kids, that they are safe and secure, and that our teachers are safe and secure. So the family model we would initiate, and then we may loosen up on the family model. Again, we want to base that on data. We want to base it on science. But the family model is another good layer that keeps us safe. And so we want to utilize the family model, and then we can begin to tweak it once we begin to see the impact a couple of months in.
All right, Dr. Little, if I've grown really attached to my face mask, which I'm not attached to the one I have right now, but if I have, can I wear my personal face coverings? Will I need to wear the district-issued ones? What will that look like?
Yes, so I imagine there is going to be a very creative elementary teacher who is very crafty, and they're going to utilize, remember, you'd walk into a teacher's classroom and their bulletin boards would just be unbelievable. I never had that ability to make a really cool bulletin board. I've got a feeling that those teachers are going to apply that same energy and effort into mask making. And so the answer is yes. If you'd like to wear your own mask and customize your own mask and bedazzle your own mask, you are certainly able to do so as long as it's comfortable for you and you're able to wear it during the course of a day.
All right, we're getting there, I think. But if folks want to change that preference towards virtual teaching, how would they go about notifying us?
Well, I would go ahead and I would send an email out as soon as you can. I would email your principal, and I would email Howard Bissell. And if you email those two people, you will get put on the list you need to put on, and we'll contact you and talk to you about virtual teaching and what that means. Now, not everybody's necessarily going to be a good virtual teacher. We have to apply for it and make sure that you are the right fit for that educational experience. That's really our goal for that, because it is going to be a different kind of teaching, and you're going to have to be really open to that kind of teaching.
Thank you. All right, friends, what am I missing here?
I have an additional question.
Okay.
We've talked in the past about that it's going to be very important to be fluid, and that we might be in a B, B model, and we might need to shift, and then we might need to shift back. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, again, I think we have to be flexible and nimble and agile. Those are three words I've really worn out over the last couple of months, because if we're not flexible, nimble, and agile, what we've learned is that the coronavirus is going to change, and the conditions around the coronavirus are going to change, and how we're approaching the coronavirus is going to change. And all these changes come lined up. Like today at 11 o'clock was a change. That was a new change. We've had to face this every step of the way. And so if we're flexible and if we're nimble and if we're agile, we'll be able to ride this wave and make really good decisions. But if we are rigid and if we have no room for flexibility, we're going to find ourselves, we could potentially find ourselves in a quagmire of a situation come later on in the fall. We don't want to do that. Now, our hope is, and I want you to know, my hope is that by the second semester, we may be looking at a vaccine. There's been a lot of good talk about a potential vaccine that's taking place in early 2021. We can be cautiously optimistic, I believe, about that. And so if we find ourselves in the second semester where things can go back to normal, we want to be able to do that as well. But especially this first semester, we want to make sure we are flexible and nimble, because if then there's not a vaccine in second semester and there's not an opportunity for us to come back to be normal, we've got to make sure these processes and protocols that we've been practicing are firmly established, because we might have to do them for the whole year.
Speaking of kind of the things we might be, and we're getting a lot of questions around the hybrid model and what that looks like for me as a teacher. How am I providing support to both of my cohorts in any given day? Can we talk a little bit about what that might look like or what we know about that?
Well, I tell you what,
so
we've got someone who's really working on that a lot. And so I'd like for Dr. Smith to address that, if you don't mind, because that to me, and I want to be clear to our folks here, that will be the guiding solitary question of our professional development, is how best to do this. One of the things we don't want to do is put you in a situation where you're not going to be successful. Again, springtime, 3 days, we had to transition the whole thing over. Now we have more than 3 days, and we want to make sure you're prepared to make this switch and prepared to provide a dynamic learning experience for our students, and regardless of if the medium which we use. So, Dr. Smith, you want to take this one?
Sure. So this is kind of a twofold answer. First, the instructional model will be addressed through the professional learning, that anytime you have a face-to-face day, those virtual days are an extension of the learning that they're doing in face-to-face. So teachers would be planning asynchronous extensions to the active engagement that they would be doing face-to-face. So that will be a thread in all of the professional learning sessions that we're offering this summer, is thinking about that planning piece. Like, how do I match my asynchronous opportunities for children on, like if they're an AA student, like an A cohort student, how would B cohort days look for them if they were home and doing virtual asynchronous work? The other part I would say, and I want people to understand, is that anything that we design to do in a virtual environment can be, like the pedagogies that work well in a virtual environment, can be switched to a more hybrid environment. So we're going to talk to them about, like, how do you set up mini lessons using Screencastify? How do you give students feedback in an asynchronous fashion? All of that is part of that professional learning this summer, and a lot of the questions I'm seeing are like, what should I take? I would encourage them to look at the catalog that I sent out, and if they have questions, to reach out to me directly, to call me, and I'll talk them through which sessions meet their needs.
Dr. Smith, do you think you can reshare that catalog again?
I will. I'll reshare it this afternoon.
Perfect. So if that's something that you're interested in, and you want to, sometimes I know my email, some things that can get buried in the email, let's resend that out and make sure everybody has access to that. Good, thank you.
All right, so those days from August 18th to the 31st, the June 9th didn't sound so bad, so now we have some folks who are wondering, where are some of those days coming from? Is that going to affect winter break, spring break, any of those sorts of times?
So a little bit. So what we're going to do is it shrinks up our winter break just a little bit. We've grabbed a couple days from the spring semester. I think there's one, the Friday prior to spring break, but you still get the full week of spring break. And so what we were trying to do, and this is really the big key factor of that when we're talking about that academic calendar, is if we moved everything back to August 31st and then did not touch any of the other dates, it moves it back pretty significantly. And we don't want to push you too far back in June and then to have you turn around and have almost no summer whatsoever and then start the next school year. So that's the trade-off. We're going to make a little less of a winter break, and it'll be kind of a day here or there second semester. But if you look at the academic calendar, you still have a 3-day weekend in January, a 3-day weekend in February, and a 3-day weekend in March. And we thought that was very important to get just some breaks as we go along. And those breaks are guaranteed. Those aren't weather makeup days. Remember, we're an e-learning district, and so we no longer have to have weather makeup days. We'll be prepared for that. And then you'll have spring break in April. So, and it's earlier, I believe, in April this year too. So those are all good news, I think, for those breathers that we know we need second semester. And I think it'll really, it's a compromise. Again, it's not what I wanted, but I think it's the best compromise that we can have. Otherwise, what happens is it pushes us way too far out in June, and then the next summer break becomes super short, and then you're turning right back around, and we're starting in August. And of course, if we go to September 8th, then that day's even shorter. So we think August 31st and how we can maneuver the rest of the calendar is pretty good.
Thank you. We have some questions about that Friday virtual day. So one question being, we've been talking about Wednesday prior to today. Why the shift to Friday? And then on that Friday, will staff members be able to work from home, or will they need to be in the building on that day?
So the shift really from Wednesday to Friday, I think for us it was about some continuity of instruction to create the AA-BB model. We also had some conversation with local employers, and oftentimes Fridays actually are easier for families to have off when their kids are not in school, or you've got employers that go 4 days a week or whatever it looks like. So we thought that one would be easier on our community as well. And of course, in the AA-BB model then is the continuity for our K-2 teachers. So those virtual days, you will be reporting to school, and we will be working on campus those days. Again, one of the critical features, I think, of the work that we do is that you have the time to do what we're asking you to do. And having those virtual days is going to allow you to check in and provide virtual support. It's going to allow us to do some creative things around interventions, both perhaps even virtually and face-to-face. And it will allow us to do some things in professional development. Our real task is not to create that day for meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting. We need you to be able to grow and to learn and to collaborate with your peers, and that's what that day is really dedicated for, as well as providing virtual support for your students. So those days are going to be very busy, but those are days that we're having you report to work those days.
Thank you. We've had a few instructional assistants ask about some implications for them in terms of their daily work on the virtual days and when students are in the building, and whether there will be some professional learning for them as well as we get cranked back up.
So I'm going to go ahead and say yes, we will be creative about your support, and your support will probably look different in the fall on those types of days than they do traditionally. But we're going to need, this is going to be an all hands on deck approach. We're going to need every person in the building providing support. And so anything that we ask you to do, we will be providing professional development along with that.
When we do get to that point where we're able to shift from the hybrid model back to a 5-day face-to-face, well, what happens at that point to the online academy? Do those students come back to the building at that point? What does it mean for merging that group back in?
Well, it kind of depends on when that happens. So really, if you're signing up for the virtual online academy, or the Learning Academy, if you're signing up for that, you're really signing up for that for a first semester, at the very least, a first semester obligation. If we're back 5 days a week, and then it becomes evident that perhaps there's a vaccine or there's some type of treatment, or whatever we know more about the virus, and then at the end of the first semester, we want to come back and have everybody back. We're really looking at that as an after Christmas or an after winter break experience with our students and our staff. But that's really looking at that after a first semester idea. It's not going to be within the first semester more than likely.
For those days when we are doing the e-learning in that hybrid model, are there some ways we'll be able to support students who don't have internet access at home?
Absolutely, we will be able to do that. And again, one of our advantages here is that we're starting at school, and we're not starting. Remember, in the spring we had that great calendar. Remember, where we had a 4-day weekend. And I thought to myself, I thought I was the smartest superintendent in the world that we created this 4-day weekend, and we were going to have this incredible break, and everybody was going to come back refreshed and renewed. And then on that Sunday is the day that we did not report back to school. So in this particular instance, we're going to have opportunities to prepare for those students who are not or do not have access, and we're going to be talking to your principals about what that looks like. But we want to help create access for those students, and our ability to use technology offline will also be one of the things we can utilize as well. So there'll be some different ways we can get around that issue.
So one of the questions we've had a lot in the past has been, are we doing anything differently about how we clean a school? What will that look like? You might want to talk some about the investments we've made in equipment and time and.
Sure. So, and again, we've done a lot of work around cleaning. We have these new little sprayers that clean things. That's the official term for it, sprayers that clean things. They ought to put that on a billboard and sell that. We have a lot of new equipment for cleaning. We are also, again, a lot of hand sanitizer, a lot of wipes and all these types of things to try to keep us clean. We're using plexiglass. Of course, there's a little bit of a plexiglass shortage at the moment, but we're ordering plexiglass. I feel like by the ton. I guess you can't order that by the barrel, but certainly by the ton. And so we have lots of opportunities that we're doing to enhance cleaning that way. We are working with our custodial staff about how best to clean about the high surface areas. But now I will tell you, it's going to take all of us to ensure that we are cleaning the high touch surface areas and make sure that we are building the barrier between us and the virus. So we'll certainly be talking about what that looks like. We're also working on the possibility of hiring a cleaning team to come in, a specialized cleaning team, and do some stuff. And we'll be talking more about that with your principals. But we certainly have to make an investment in cleaning because, again, that's one of the big three. If your hand sanitization and staying clean, we know that is a factor that keeps us safe, and so we'll be investing lots of energy and effort in that.
Will there be some people who wear maybe some different PPE than just the cloth face covering, depending on their position?
Yeah, great question. So we obviously have people who engage with students in different ways, whether it be a speech pathologist or a school psychologist or a school nurse, and they may have very different PPE to ensure they can do their job, but we will also be providing that PPE as well.
When do we anticipate having the calendar for folks to see in terms of start dates and all of that?
Yeah, so we're presenting that calendar to the board. I know the calendar committee and others have looked at it, but we're gonna be voting on those changes Tuesday night. Again, it's not exactly how we would have normally done that in the past, but we're gonna vote on that Tuesday night and make sure everybody sees it so you have time to plan. But this calendar change, it was the least disruptive calendar change that we could create, and that had to be part of our decision making, is what was most disruptive. We knew if we moved dates up and started earlier in August, we might have people out of town and people not be able to participate, and we didn't want that to happen. So we knew by moving it back, we guaranteed greater staff and student participation, and we haven't messed with the back end of the calendar quite as much. So again, we made some tweaks to winter break, and we made some tweaks to some days in the second semester. But overall, I would say that the folks who worked on the calendar moved pretty significant mountains to make sure it's not as disruptive as it could have been.
And just to clarify that, we'll be really clear with people in that who needs to work on the leap days and who that applies to.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you're gonna, if you have to work on a leap day, you're gonna know about that, and we'll communicate that to you, absolutely.
Do we have any anticipated timeline on when we'll know numbers of students in the virtual program, when schools can start planning for that, specifically around the number from their campus?
Well, that right there is that's the critical piece for how we can plan. And so we are right now above 50% of our community has provided feedback, or our parents and students have provided feedback. And that number continues to grow. We're doing another one of these together talks with our community tomorrow night. I'm fairly certain that's going to be a topic of conversation. But yes, as soon as we can start making that plan, we may have a timeline for that. Dr. Smith, do you have the timeline for that just available? If not, that's okay.
For the virtual academy?
For the virtual academy, when we're going to be doing the pieces of the virtual academy?
Sure. So I can give you general timeframes. So we will be communicating, sending out last communications from the district this week, right?
We've already done that.
And that's been done this week. And then schools will begin communicating directly with families who have not done those in the next couple of days. And so after that, we will settle on the data and send that out directly to schools, and they'll be able to start tracking, we'll be able to start cohorting children in the next week or so. But I can tell you, any student that has already named themselves or their families have said, I'm gonna be at a virtual academy child, we do know, like the administrators in the school do know students who are already being selected that.
Great. Yeah, that process is moving very, very quickly. And so that's the key piece of why we need to know if they're going to be in a virtual academy or not. I'm sorry, the Learning Academy. I'm going to make sure we use the right language. It's the Learning Academy. And that, and will have to be a fairly quick turnaround so we can schedule that and make sure all the classes are available for them and make sure we have all the teachers and everything else. So essentially we're creating a district out of scratch. So if we have, say, 20% of our district who is involved in the Learning Academy, well, that's over 4,000 students. And so that's actually larger than lots of the school districts in South Carolina. So we're going to be creating a school district out of scratch over the next 6 weeks.
Okay, I think I have 2 more questions. I
All
know we're
right.
almost there on our time, but we do have quite a few questions around special education. And I know we've talked about that, and we had mentioned maybe we would even have a follow-up conversation
That's right.
specifically addressing special education. But I didn't know if there was anything you wanted to say today in how we're thinking about and planning for our students who need some extra support.
Well, again, special education, we're going to be really focused on individual needs of students. And we're going to do a more in-depth conversation just about special education over the next week or so. But I mean, understand that our students with disabilities and our students who have IEPs and 504s, we're going to continue to work very diligently to make sure we are fulfilling those learning needs of those students. And their weeks may look differently than the week of a general education student. So we'll do more presentations about that, and we'll go much more in depth about that. But understand, their weeks may look differently depending on what they need and what they do than, say, Naomi Little, who does not have an IEP.
We do have several teachers who have reached out, or several employees who have reached out to say that they feel better after hearing you answer some
Great.
questions
Yay.
today. So in fact, we
That's
have
mission
someone
accomplished.
who wants you to know how appreciative our employees are that you're listening and giving a voice in this way. So I think that definitely been able to answer some questions. We do have one that's come up a couple of times for us
Okay.
to kind of maybe end with. In light of the day that has been, is this plan, what does it mean in terms of our plan moving forward from here, submitting to the state, all of those kinds of things?
Well, so far, nothing that I've heard or seen contradicts the plan that we're putting in place, because our goal is to get to a 5-day model. That is our goal, and that was we've asked parents in a survey, do they want a hybrid / face-to-face model? Our goal is to get to a 5-day model, but we believe you have to get there through carefully measured steps, and you have to make sure that we're going to do it safely for both our students and staff. And we believe you have to have a transition period in order to make that happen. Again, you can't just jump in the deep end without taking any swimming lessons. Everything about the fall is going to be different. You're going to have a fairly large group of students who are going to be on our Learning Academy. You're going to have groups of students who are going to have to learn to wear masks each and every day. Same with teachers. That we're going to have safety protocols. There's going to be plexiglass. There's going to be all these changes to what we do. Something I mentioned the other day, something as simple as a fire drill, something that we take for granted because we've been doing fire drills forever. And if you lined up a room full of 1,000 teachers and had a fire drill, they could be out of that room in less than a minute. There's no doubt in my mind. But even something as simple as a fire drill will have to change next year because the A students and the B students will both need to have one. Or they'll have to be appropriately socially distanced, or how does that look, getting out of the building, and how does it change the doors that we go of, and how we stagger our way out so we don't have everybody at one time. It'll be changes to how do we change classes, simple things, how do we go get lunch. All of these things will change. And so in order to make sure that we are creating the safest environment possible, we have to practice that. We have to give feedback for that. And then we have to monitor the impact on all those data points about when we come together. Because here's is really a big takeaway that I've had recently. We talk about all these other countries that have come back to school. It's my understanding that all those other countries really had controls in place from the community perspective before they decided to come back to school. And even some of those, there are incidences in some of those places that they've had to close school and start all over. So instead of rushing headlong into it, what we want to do is take our time, take a measured approach, and make sure that each step of the way we are taking care of the safety and health of our students and our teachers, and not just teachers, our staff, everybody in the building. Because understand this, it takes our bus drivers, it takes our cafeteria workers, it takes our custodians, it takes our front office staff, it takes our instructional assistants, it takes our teachers, it takes our administrators. And I always get in trouble when I start listing people because I always forget people. So I don't want to forget school psychologists or nurses or guidance counselor or school counselors. And I don't want to forget librarians, and I don't want to forget everybody in the building that makes such a difference each and every day. So again, I hate listing people because I always forget somebody, but I want you to know that every person in the building, everyone, is going to make a significant difference. And we need everybody and all hands on deck. And we have to make sure your safety and your well-being is taken care of. And we have to do that first and foremost. And I know we're getting late on time, but I want you to know again, Lexington One is a family. And that family, in times of crisis, in times of need, in times of stress, the family comes together. We look out after each other. We take care of each other. And I want you to know that each step of the way, the Lexington family will embrace you, well, from socially distance, obviously, and make sure that you are taken care of and that you're okay. Because we value you, we need you, and our students will need you in the fall like never before. But I know that this will be our finest hour as we move forward. Thank you so much for joining us today for our Thought Talk. Again, we will have more of these as we go along. I believe we have an evaluation tool.
So
if you want to talk about the evaluation
in
tool?
the description of the YouTube presentation you're seeing now, there are two links. One was to the question and answers, which you've continued to submit to during this presentation, and the other is to a short evaluation. So if you would take a few minutes to do that after this ends, after you've watched the video or you've been participating in this particular session, then if you would fill out the evaluation, that'll help us improve these, because we know there are going to be many things to talk about in the future.
Again, thank you for joining us for our Together Talk. Thank you.